All right, we're going to come to the end of a series that we started a few weeks ago called My Brother's Giver. And I want to close this series with a simple challenge to you today. We've been talking about why we must be, we are called to be, brothers givers, because God, when He saved us, and when we accepted Jesus as our personal Savior, we have become officially the firstborn because of Jesus. And that means everyone who still do not know Christ is our brother. He is still lost, and we have a responsibility towards them. So we started off this series talking about how God calls us to be people who show kindness through your life. And we asked you to do that. We asked you to do random acts of kindness on week 1. In week 2, we talked about sacrificial giving. We talked about how sacrificial giving can be powerful. When you give more than what you can, what you have, what you want, out of all that you earned, God uses that to bless people and make you a person who's influential. Last week we talked about what makes God smile, what kind of giving makes God smile, and I talked about how a cheerful giving makes God smile, how cheerful giving can be powerful, and I talked about how to do cheerful giving. This week we're going to close with what we titled as smart generosity. Let's call that, and we're going to explain that a little more as we look at the scriptures. I want you to turn your Bibles to Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 and 20. Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 and 20. It's what I call smart generosity. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on the earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourself treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. The moment I read that, you probably understood what I'm going to talk about today. We looked at generosity as a matter of our heart. Generosity is a matter of heart, matter of a person, how God changed our lives and how that transformation comes out and expresses itself through our lives. We challenged you to give joyfully to God. It is the measure of how God changed your life. Give joyfully. 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 7 tells us that each man should give what he has decided in his heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. That's what we talked last week. Give joyfully because it's a matter of heart. Number 2, give selflessly. That's what we talked about over the last few weeks. 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verses 5, we talked about Macedonians and how they give as they did not do as we expected, and they did not do as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord and then to us, keeping with God's will. Paul, talking about Macedonian church, talked about how they gave out of their poverty, and they gave more than what we have expected, and they gave it cheerfully without even thinking about it twice. So give selflessly to God. The third one that we discussed, the condition of our heart, would be giving willingly. Giving willingly. Again, in Matthew chapter 5, verses 17, it says, do not think that I have come to abolish the law of the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Jesus, in Matthew chapter 5, is talking about how Christians should live on the earth. And as he's setting up a model Christian life, he talks about giving, he talks about heart's attitude, and he says, when you begin to live according to what I taught you, you're actually fulfilling the law. So give willingly because it is fulfillment of God's will in our lives. Then we challenge you to give thankfully to God because of what God has done to you, you need to repay God with thankfulness. Psalm 116 verses 12 says this, how can I repay the Lord for all the goodness that He's shown me? The psalmist is thinking about all the good things that God has done for him, and he's actually thinking, how can I repay God back through my life? And obviously there is nothing that we can do to measure up to what God has done for us. But one way of responding back to the generosity of God is for us to show generosity to people that are around us, and that is giving thankfully. Today we're going to talk about giving intentionally. That's the heart which I think we all need to have. I want to take you to two verses in the Bible, in the New Testament. 2 Corinthians chapter 9 verses 7. 2 Corinthians chapter 9 verses 7. You must make up your mind as to how much you should give. Don't give reluctantly or in response to the pressure. I like it in the NLT version. It's basically saying, always be prepared to give beforehand. That means plan your giving. Isn't that what he's saying? Plan your giving beforehand, and when you do that, don't give it because of pressure. Don't give it because it is an obligation. You plan what you want to give beforehand. 1 Timothy chapter 6 verses 19. When you do that, what happens? 1 Timothy chapter 6 verses 19. By doing this, you will be storing up a real treasure for yourself in heaven. It is the only safe investment for eternity. It is the only safe investment for eternity. And that's the word that caught my attention. And that's what I wanted to talk about. A few weeks ago, I was sitting with one of our church members over a coffee. We were discussing about the Dream Center and how, what kind of workshops we need to do in the Dream Center. And I was actually asking him to do one of the workshops with us. And he was talking about that he wants to do a workshop on investments. When we were discussing about what that would look like, I started thinking about how big investments are right now in this world. Big thing, right? All of us have some kind of investment being done in our lives, in the form of a fixed deposit, in the form of a recurring deposits, shares, mutual funds. It has become a big thing, right? About 1 year back, everywhere, every hoarding is about mutual funds, insurances. So I got really interested in mutual funds. So I wanted to know what exactly mutual funds are, and so started inquiring about what mutual funds are and why is such a big thing. Mutual funds, the board says, right? So I wanted to know what it actually means and why is this thing such a big thing. And as I began to explore, I realized there is more than just one tagline which says mutual funds are mutual funds. I realized there are many types of mutual funds. There is money market funds. There is equity funds, fixed income funds. There is balanced funds. There is specialty funds. What's really interesting is there is a fund of funds in mutual funds. So people are coming up with so many ideas on how to invest what we have for the future. So I want to give you 5 ways to invest for eternity. You're all doing investments for yourself on the earth. I want to teach you 5 kinds of investments that you need to do that you will actually keep. Because there are 2 truths that you and I need to remember. Number 1, I will enjoy forever what I invest in heaven. I will enjoy forever what I invest in heaven. I may be able to enjoy what I invest in banks or shares or mutual funds here on earth. But at some point, I cease to enjoy them. But what I invest in heaven, I will enjoy them forever. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 17 and 18 The same verse that we have, the one verse prior to that, that we have read in, verses 19. Now it's verse 17 and 18. Tell those who are rich not to be proud and not to trust in their money, which will soon be gone, but their pride and trust should be in God, who richly gives us all that we need for our enjoyment. Tell them to use their money to do good. So what Paul is trying to teach to Timothy is this. Hey, tell Timothy, as a pastor, teach your church to invest into something that they can enjoy forever. Not on the earth, not just on the earth, but enjoy forever. If you want to enjoy forever, then you must learn to invest in heaven. That's a truth that you need to remember. There's a second truth to that. That is this, that I will invest in heaven every time I use my money here on earth to do something good. This is something that you and I need to remember. I will invest in heaven every time I use my money here on earth to do something good. Again, that same verse is trying to teach them that they should be good, rich in doing good works for others, giving happily to those who are in need, always ready to share with others whatever God has given to them. Whatever God gave you, be happy to share with others. That's how you begin to store up in heaven, which you will enjoy forever. Keep these two truths in your mind as I talk about 5 kinds of investments, which I want to call the smart investment. Number 1. The first one, I think, is I want to call this God's Treasury Fund. God's Treasury Fund. God, talking to people in the book of Malachi, talks about giving as an act of worship to Him. Giving as an act of worship. This, when you come to the temple of God, when you begin to worship Him, it's not just your song, it's not just your presence, but it's also what you give. It becomes that becomes the act of worship. When you give less than what you can give, you are not offering full worship to God. That's what I think I talked about it last Sunday, so I don't want to touch that too much. But I just want to encourage you with this, that whenever you come to worship God in the church or anywhere else, and when you cheerfully give to the work of God, to the temple of God, you are actually performing an act of worship to Him. Every time I go to a wedding, I actually teach this in the wedding, and probably some of your weddings, which if I performed your weddings, I would have preached this to you. But one more time, Proverbs chapter 3 verses 9. This is what it says: honor the Lord by giving Him the first part of all your income. Honor the Lord by giving Him the first part of all your income, and He will then fill your barns. He will then fill your barns. What's more, He will then He will give you so much that it will start overflowing, and it will overflow through your barrels. That's what He says. So this is the principle I teach to every person who is getting married, every home that I go to first time. I teach them, always give to God first. If something belongs to God, it should go to God. It should not be used, it should not be misused, it should not be abused. It has to be given to God, because that's how you say, God, I actually worship you. Because by giving this, I'm saying, God, I know you are the owner of this, and by giving you what belongs to you, what you demand from me, I'm actually saying, I'm submitting to your will, and this is my act of worship to you. That's why we keep teaching you to give your tithes. It's not because we want to keep them with us, but by you giving your tithes, by you giving what belongs to God back to God, you are actually saying, God, I'm following whatever you're asking me to do. And when you do that, you are offering an act of worship, you're following the righteousness, the right thing, because that's what God asked you to do. And God as he accepts that, he will respond back with a blessing to you. How much? Not only he will meet what you need, he will also give you more than you need. That's a promise in Proverbs chapter 3, verses 9. So, the way to worship God is by giving. Our money, our tithes, what belongs to God, to God. The reason I called it God Treasury Fund is because in Malachi, he very specifically mentions, bring your thing, your offerings to the storehouse of God, the treasury of God. Bring your offerings to the treasury of God. When you don't do that, you're robbing God of what actually belongs to God. Start storing up in God's treasury fund. Number 2, the second smart investment is what I call God's mutual fund. God's mutual fund. This is when you begin to invest by using your money to encourage others. When you, to encourage fellowship within the church. When you begin to invest using your money to encourage a fellowship, you're actually investing into God's mutual fund, of course, because we're investing mutually into each other's lives. Romans, how do you invest? Let me just give you 3 verses and explain that to you. Romans chapter 12, verses 10. Love one another with mutual affection. This is a mutual investment. When you begin to respect each other, when you begin to honor the person who's sitting beside you, irrespective of where that person comes from, but when you begin to respect and show your affection to them, you are investing into their lives. You know, the moment I said investment, you're actually thinking about just money. But I'm also talking about this. When you respect a person who comes to the church, irrespective of their social status, irrespective of which community that person comes from, irrespective of which ethnicity that person holds, when you begin to love that person and show affection and respect, you are investing into that person. Romans chapter 12, verses 13. Share what you have with God's people who are in need. And he goes on to say, show hospitality. Show hospitality. I was reading a book called Outlive Your Life. One of the chapters is called Open Your Heart, Open Your Homes. So I began to read, to understand what exactly the title actually meant. And he was talking about how the New Testament church functioned. The New Testament church, if you read the book of Acts, you will find it rather interesting that every place where church is mentioned, people met at home. Right from the beginning. The entire New Testament church, if you see, at least the book of Acts, of course in later years we have got these temples being adopted as a common place of worship. And of course, the New Testament church also met in temples and synagogues, but most of their fellowship took place in homes. It is by opening your home, you are actually investing in a fellowship. You are investing in God's mutual fund. We have very less people with hospitality, heart of hospitality. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. What matters is if you have a heart to open your home for others to come together, to pray together, to celebrate each other, to equip each other, you are investing in God's mutual fund. Open your homes for others to come together, to pray, to celebrate Christ. New Testament church thrived on homes that opened themselves, on people who have an open heart, who believed that, hey, my home belongs to others too. My home belongs to my fellow brothers, my fellow Christians, and I'd like to open my home for others to come in and have fellowship in my home. When they did that, and of course it requires a little bit of sacrifice, a little bit of adjustment of your time and giving yourself up for that cause. But that is the investment that you do for eternity. Hospitality is a way of investing into the kingdom of God. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24, the third verse, and I want to show you the third way to invest into God's mutual fund. Think of ways to encourage one another, this is what he's saying, with outbursts of love and good deeds. With outbursts of love and good deeds. What he's trying to teach is this, that yes, of course, as Christians, you're called to support people who are outside in this world, and that's the whole theme of this entire series. But it's also important for us to invest into people who are from within our church, within our fellowship. If you find somebody who is in need, it's our responsibility as brothers, as a church, to respond back if we can. If they ask us to help them, we should be ready and be willing to help people within our fellowship. That's how you show the love. That's what he's saying. By outbursts of love, how do you know that your love is being expressed? By doing good deeds. That's how you invest into God's mutual fund. When you begin to respect one another, you are investing into God's mutual fund. When you begin to open your homes, you are investing into God's mutual fund. When you begin to support another believer when they are in need, you are investing into God's mutual fund. When you do that, this is what's happening. It proves that you are one family. It proves that we're actually what we say we are, God's family. That you are in God's family. What's more, it creates unity among us. It creates unity among us. When we begin to serve each other, when we begin to show respect to each other, when we begin to support each other with affection, with love, we are growing in unity together as a church. What's more, the best thing is this, that it will become a witness to unbelievers. It will become a witness to unbelievers. This is what Jesus said. On the last day, after he washed the feet of disciples and broke the bread with them, he sat down with them and he said, I want to give you a new command. You've heard many commands so far. I want to give you a new command. This is the new command. Love one another as I have loved you. This is what he said in John chapter 13. Love one another as I have loved you. He's not talking about that the other command where he said love God and love your neighbor. That's not what he's talking about. Now he's talking about believers loving one another. Said love one another as I have loved you, the same love with which I loved you. You begin to love the fellow Christian. That means you offer forgiveness again and again, again and again, again and again, even though they break your heart. Even though they stand behind you, keep stabbing you, you still offer forgiveness if it is a fellow brother. That's what God does for us. So that's what he's expecting from us. Now he's saying this. When you love one another, if you love one another as I loved you, then the world will know that you are my disciples. Then the world will know that you are my disciples. Same thought he explains in Luke chapter 6. And same strain of thoughts, and he comes to the conclusion where he says, show compassion to wicked and unthankful people, just as your Father is compassionate. Then he goes on to say, then the world will know that you are a child of God. Then the world will know that you are a child of God. So here is the challenge. That when we begin to mutually respect one another and invest in each other and show hospitality towards each other, then it becomes a witness for the world to see who Christ is. That's the second fund. Number 3, the third fund that you can invest in is God's, or what I want to call God's growth fund. God's growth fund. That means invest your money to build your character. Invest your money to build your character. It's very rare that I saw that many Christians don't spend money in investing to grow personally, spiritually. I've not seen many Christians buying good books. I've not seen many Christians actually spending time paying money and listening to good messages. Actually reading good books. And I will pay money for Netflix. I'll pay money for Amazon Video, whatever, Prime. I'll pay money. In our credit card, it's actually paid for every week, every month automatically. But none of us, I can give you a guarantee that many of us don't have something that we go to every day and learn from. By the way, we are working on providing you a platform called Right Now Media, which is like a Netflix and Amazon Prime, but has all the messages all across the world, lots of study notes, lots of books that you can actually study online. I realize that most of our guys are digital people, so we're really working with them. It's a new media coming to India, but they only work through churches. That means our church must subscribe to that, and then we give access to you so that you can download it on your phone and start using it. We are really working on that, and we will get it to you as soon as possible. But it's a brilliant platform. I'm actually doing a trial on that, but it's a brilliant platform, and I'm learning a lot out of that. So we are working to help you to invest your money into yourself. It's really important. Proverbs says this. Proverbs chapter 10, verses 16. The earnings of the godly enhance their lives, but evil people squander their money on sin. That means if you're not investing in yourself to grow consciously, you're actually sinning. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Look at next verse. Another verse I want to show you. Proverbs chapter 22, verses 23. Invest in truth and wisdom, discipline and good sense. Don't part with them. The same verse in Message version says like this. Buy wisdom, buy education, buy insight. Use your money to buy wisdom. Use your money to buy insight. Use your money to buy understanding. Don't squander your money. I'm not saying don't buy things. I'm just saying don't squander your money on things that won't last with you. Use your money to build your character. Use your money where you know you're going to learn something and grow consciously. That's your investment. That's God's growth fund. Isaiah chapter 55, verses 2. Why spend your money on food that does not give you strength and does you no good? Listen, I will tell you where to get food, and that is good for the soul. So invest in where God can speak to you and help you to grow much smarter, much wiser, much better as a person and as a Christian. Proverbs chapter 16, verses 16. It is better, much better, to have wisdom and knowledge than gold and silver. It's better, much better, to have wisdom and knowledge than gold and silver. Use your money to invest in a place, invest in a person who can help you to grow consciously, who can help you to grow in your character, who can help you to grow as a Christian. That's God's growth fund. Okay, that's number 3. Number 4, the fourth way that you can invest into eternity is this: God's service fund. God's service fund. I want to call that God's service fund because now you're using your money to serve others. I told you to use your money on yourself first so that you can grow, but use also your money to help others to grow. Serve others. That's how we started off the entire series, so I'm not going to spend much time there, but I want to read few verses for you so that you can remember just 2 verses. Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verses 1 and 2. Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verses 1 and 2. Let me read it in Message version. I like the way it is expressed. Be generous, invest in acts of charity. Why? Charity yields high returns. Charity yields high returns. Don't hoard your goods, spread them around. Be a blessing to others. Be a blessing to others. How do you have high returns? When you begin to invest in others. That's what the wise man is teaching to us. This is the richest man who ever lived on the earth. Not Rockefeller, not Bill Gates, not who's the Amazon guy, but the richest man who ever lived on the earth is Solomon. And this man is teaching us, hey, invest in others, you will have high returns. That's why we taught you right in the beginning of this series, show acts of kindness. Do random act of kindness every day if possible, because that's what brings high returns to you. Proverbs chapter 19 verses 17. When you give to the poor, it is like lending to the Lord. That's amazing, huh? When you give to the poor, it is like you are lending to God. At least lend to God, no? If not for any other reason. It is like lending to the Lord, and He will pay you back. He's not somebody who's going to take your money and keep it in His pocket, and never talk about it. He's not like that. He's going to pay you back. So that's how you give to God. That's why you need to give to others. When you give to others, you're basically lending to God, and God is not going to keep it back in His pocket. He's going to pay you back. And I want to tell you, your returns are going to be really high. God's Service Fund. Number 5, God's Global Fund. I want to call this God's Global Fund. This is investing into ministry, investing into missions, investing into people who are serving God, investing into people, into places, organizations, institutions that are tirelessly working to make sure the kingdom of God is spread. You need to do that. It's your responsibility, church, because of somebody investing into an institution, because of somebody investing into a person, you are saved. Your family is saved. You are here today because somebody, somewhere, from some part of the world, chose to invest in somebody he doesn't know, in somebody he may know, because they believed my giving will help somebody to come to Christ. And because they did that, you are saved, and you are here sitting today. So it's our responsibility to invest into God's global fund. I want to give you 3 ways in which you can invest into God's global fund. Number 1, invest into making friends who do not know Christ. Invest your money to make friends whom you can actually lead to Christ. This is what Jesus said. This is the strategy Jesus gave us. I didn't give this. Luke chapter 16 verses 9. Look at what Jesus is saying. Use your worldly wealth to gain friends for you. Use your worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself. Why? So that when it is gone, when the wealth is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwelling. What Jesus is saying is, hey, use your money to make friends and bring them along to heaven. Because the money is gone, your friends will come with you to heaven. Brilliant, huh? So you think of smart ways that you can use your money to gain friends and use your influence, your life, to show them Christ. That's a great strategy. There's a second way that you can invest into God's global fund. Every week they would put water, only this week. 3 John. In 3 John verses 8, we must support believers who go on trips like this so that we can work together with them in spreading the truth. So that we can work with them in spreading the truth. What John is saying is, invest into others who are reaching out to the world with the gospel. Investing into believers who are reaching out to others to serve them. That's why we challenge you, even if you can't go to mission trips, even if you can't be on short-term mission trip, support somebody who's willing to go. Pay for their tickets. The reason we are asking you to do that is because we are actually helping you to follow the word. When you do that, somebody else is going and they are doing the work of God, and whatever they do actually reflects back in your life as a blessing. I know there are people in our church who did that, and the boys or the girls who were not able to, who could not afford for themselves to go on missions were able to go on missions because some of you actually generously gave for their tickets, paid for their tickets to travel and to go into places where they can serve God and be exposed to missions. There's a third way that you can invest into God's global fund. 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 13. You honor God through this genuine act of service in your commitment to spread the good news of Christ through your generosity in sharing. What he's teaching basically there is this: learn to invest into ministry. Learn to invest into the place where you are being blessed. Learn to invest into institutions that are serving God, because even though you are not able to do anything, they are doing it. Even though you cannot go to places that you wish you could go to, they are going. That's why missions is such a priority for us as a church. I know this. We didn't show you in the video. During this week, middle of this week, last week, on the 5th of December, we invited all the pastors and the children whom our church is supporting. We had like 20 families here in our church, and we did a banquet for them, Christmas banquet for them. We gave them gifts. We gave them, of course, your shoe boxes to their children as gifts. We bought clothes for them, and I know some of them cannot afford to buy, for this Christmas, so we bought clothes for them. We gave away monetary gift to them, not because we want to show off, but because we want to tell them, hey, we are there to celebrate with you. I know you'll be all alone in your own village, in your own town. You can't, you will probably be the one who's arranging all the meetings and doing everything, and nobody is there to stand along with you. We want to tell you we are here as a church. And I told them on that day, my dad was supposed to come and speak, and he couldn't make it, so I had to speak. And this is the thought that God put in my heart, and I told them this: never compare yourself with our church. Never compare with Capstone. What you do, Capstone can never do. It's impossible for Capstone to plant a church somewhere in agency area in Khammam. It's impossible for us to go there and do it. I cannot do that. In my entire life, I don't think I can ever do that unless God enables me to do that. Your calling is very special. My calling is very special. My calling is this: to help people in this city to become mission-minded, to become a church that can support people like you. I told them, don't look at our church and think, oh my God, I want to be like this. Don't. If you try to be like this, you will not do justice to what God called you to do. So what I meant to tell them is this: each of us have our own calling, and we do our calling at best if we stick to our calling. And so what they do, we can never do. But what we can do is to stand with them. God blessed us as a church. God blessed us with finances. God blessed us with people of influence. God blessed us with you, with great talents in your hand, skill sets in your hand, which we can use to support churches like that, ministries like that. That's how you invest into God's global fund. Use your talents, use your skills, use your money, use your resources, use your political clout to help churches. Churches that cannot stand on themselves, or ministries that cannot stand on themselves, pastors that are struggling. By the way, on behalf of them, I want to thank you for investing into their lives, and they've been very happy. All of them began to send me pictures of how their children felt, and some of the children, of course, were here. It was a beautiful Wednesday that we had the banquet, Wednesday afternoon. Give to God's global fund. The more you give, the more you'll be blessed. Let me close up with 3 challenges. Remember this. If not anything in this series, just remember these 3. Do what you should do. Do what you should do. That you give to God first. You give to any place God showed you, any person God showed you. You respond in kindness to any person God nudges you to. If you need to give extra tip, give extra tip. Show kindness to people. Do what you should do. God expects that from you. It's the sign of your faithfulness to God. Luke chapter 16, verses 10 and 11. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? What God is saying is this: I cannot give you true riches if you are not even handling what I already gave you properly. Your job, your money, your properties, all that I gave you, they are worldly wealth. If you are not handling them properly, how do you think I want to bless you with eternal blessing? I cannot. So he's saying, that's why I'm challenging you. Do what you should do by faithfully following what the scripture tells you to do. Number 2, never forget this. Do what you could do. Do what you could do. That means this: you follow what you are supposed to do, but also do what you could. That means not just a little bit, do more than what you can, more than what you should. That's what Paul is surprised with the Macedonian church. He was so surprised, that's what he said in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verses 3 and 4. He's saying they gave as much as they were able, that is what they should do, and even beyond their ability, that's what they could do. You see the difference? They gave as much as they were able, even beyond their ability to give. Entirely on their own. Nobody pressurized them. Nobody pushed them to do it. In fact, they urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in this service. That's why Paul was very impressed with Macedonian church. It's a proof of your sacrifice. When you do more than what you should do and do what you could do, it's a sign of your sacrifice. Number 3, do what you should do what you could do. Number 3, do what you would do. If you have money, what would you do? Some of us would sit there and think, if I have $1 million, I wish I have $1 million. I could do this. I would do this, right? Dreams. So when you have little, do what you would do. Again, 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 10 and 11. Now, he who supplies the seed, last week I talked about this. He who supplies the seed to the sower and bread for the food will also supply and increase your store of seed and will enlarge the harvest of your righteousness. You will be made rich in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion. And through us, your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God. Do you know what he said? Last week I explained that to you. First of all, if you want to give, God will give you the seed. Second, if you use your seed properly, he will give you more than you need. And then I told you he will begin to multiply it if you keep giving. So whatever you are thinking in your mind, I wish I had so much so that I could do more, start doing what you should do and what you could do, then you will be able to do what you would do. Make sense? You can be your brother's giver. You can change this world through your life, through your generosity, through your compassion. That's the measure of your faith. When you begin to do what you could do, what you would do, that's the measure of your faith. So if I do what I should do, it's a measure of my faithfulness. If I do what I could do, it's the measure of my sacrifice. If I do what I would do, it's the measure of my faith. When you do that, here is a promise from God. 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 6. Remember this: whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, but whoever sows generously will also reap generously. I love this verse, and that's the theme verse for Dream Center. And I want to close this entire series with that verse, Psalm 112, verses 9. Psalm 112, verses 9. They share freely and give generously to those in need. He's talking about righteous people. Huh? They share freely and give generously to those in need. Their good deeds will be remembered forever, and they will have influence and honor. They will have influence and honor. This is my wish, my prayer for every Capstonian. That when you begin to give, you will be remembered forever. That's your legacy. That you will have influence and honor here on earth. So I wish that you will have such an impact that here on earth, people will begin to respect you and honor you for your generosity. And then in heaven, God will respect you for your generosity. That's your legacy. I pray that you will be your brother's giver, not just this season, but all through your life, so that you can change the world. You can change this world.